I'll call that committee of the whole meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the consent calendar. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is appearance of visitors. We have one visitor, and I'm not going to go through the formality to save time. Ms. Mclarty, you have the floor. Got 3 minutes.
Report that I brought for you all today.
Thank you very much.
I'll go ahead and get started while Nancy's getting these to you, but thank you for this opportunity. And I wanted to just introduce myself as Susan Mclarty, the coordinator of the Greenville Homeless Alliance. And in 2019, Dr. Royster helped release what was at that time an updated report on homelessness in Greenville County. He really captured the audience that day, where we had over 100,000 people learn about this issue by saying it was a cold and rainy November day, and he really helped everyone feel just what a student who's trying to show up and learn in our Greenville County schools might be experiencing if they were also housing unstable or literally without a home. And, you know, I want to just say, why should that matter? And I hope now that you all have the report in front of you, you'll turn to page 10 and just look at the rising number of students experiencing homelessness. And these are families that do self-report, so we believe it is underreported, but I want to highlight, you know, majority of those are in elementary school, and majority are doubled up trying to find somewhere. We're thankful that only 2 students reported being literally unsheltered. The very back of your report, we have the list that's provided by Irene Hamilton Jones, who's the McKinney-Vento coordinator. And so we're going around and trying to share this with all the municipalities. We want you as the school board to recognize these 86 on the page. Flip to this page. It's also on your summary sheet. Page 14 and 15 just show you this challenge that while we're experiencing so much growth, over 200,000 more people expected to move here by 2040, this rising, what's called your family median income, means it's harder for families to exit homelessness. But we hope you'll really dive into the report and give a look at how a graduate of Southside High School is featured as being a true entrepreneur, and she and her family exiting. So there's many community solutions in here that we hope you'll also take a moment to dive into. And I want to just end by saying I was hoping that Dr. Scott Turner would be here so I could also thank him today for jumping in and serving on our steering committee once the report was released, and appreciate Dr. Royster asking him to serve and him jumping in and providing. He said, I don't really know anything about homelessness, but I'm willing to learn. So he has been a great asset, and we will miss his leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLaurin. Okay, our next item on the agenda is instruction. First item under instruction 3.01, social emotional learning. This was requested by Ms. Leventis Wells. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. If I might, before we do that, I did want to make one introduction. In the personnel approved today, the new Associate Superintendent for Operations, Dr. George Ward. Some of you may know Dr. Ward, others may not. There's Dr. Ward, live and in person this morning. So, George, congratulations on your appointment to Associate Superintendent of Operations. We look forward to you serving in that leadership role. We want to make sure that they all got a chance to meet you, for those that perhaps don't already know you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the overcoming.
Thank you, Dr. Ward.
Sure. I just want to say to Dr. Royster, you're probably going to have to give
Dr. Ward, a new phone number? Because I'm sure all those teachers and staff that he's helped are still going to be dialing his number up.
Maybe seeking out additional favors now from us.
Okay, Dr. Royster, social emotional learning.
Thank you. This was a request from Mrs. Leventis Wells, and we had put together a presentation. You all received a presentation several months ago, so in some respects this is a review of that, kind of hitting the high spots of that and going back to why do we have social emotional learning, what is the objective to it. In our district, it extends back to the establishment of the current strategic plan. So probably the first seeds of this program were in 2017, 2018, as that plan was begun to be developed. It is tied directly to the state's profile of a graduate, and while I think in recent months, maybe in the last year or so, for whatever reason, people have attached meanings to social and emotional learning that are in no way related to social and emotional learning. Social and emotional learning to Greenville County schools means what it meant in 2018 and 2019. And Ms. Hampshire is going to share with you today a review of what that means for us, what it means for our students. She's also, I think in her presentation, going to remind us that based on feedback we got from high school students, we are revamping the high school portion, and that will happen over the summer. Now, Dr. Turner, unfortunately, is out sick today. He was going to lead this presentation along with Ms. Hampshire because he chaired the group that put together the operational part of the social and emotional learning. But unfortunately, he's not able to be here today, but Ms. Hampshire will certainly do a great job in his stead of reviewing this for us and then certainly answer any questions that you all might have. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Hampshire at this time.
Good morning. I'm so honored to be here. And I'm Dr. Ellen Hampshire. I am multi-tiered system of supports coordinator for the district, just so you know my role. I was here last year and presenting some of this information as well. And it's such an honor to be here with you to talk about this topic. So we're going to jump right into our strategic plan, of course, because that is rooted in the needs of our students. When you developed this plan, we looked at input from students, from teachers, from parents, from our community, and we looked at what was needed in the realms of our environment. And what was decided was that we needed to be more intentional about creating a healthy school environment that was more conducive to learning, but also more intentional about promoting the social, emotional, and intellectual well-being for our students. Those needs that you identified back then have not evaporated. If anything, they are more prominent. We have heard that time and time again from our students, our teachers, and our parents, and our principals. So we're going to take a look at a video that contrasts two school environments. One that supports the needs of the whole child, and one that essentially neglects the needs of the whole child.
Hey, Mr. Q! Did you see that? Why would somebody do that?
Please go into the classroom, no talking, quietly.
Hey, Miss Merida, how you doing?
We need you inside.
How do you think that makes us feel? I forgot my number.
What's your name?
Jordan.
What's your last name?
Carter.
All right. Go ahead.
School is hard enough.
Come on in, sit down quietly at your desks, and begin writing.
This kind of stuff just makes it harder.
I said quietly, please. Who's talking? Is it you, Sophie? Don't let it be you.
don't believe me?
Sophie,
Please just watch.
I'm not up here for me, I'm up here for you. Pay attention, okay? Now somebody answer me. Somebody needs to answer me really fast.
Every time we're ignored or yelled at or silenced, the teacher takes away what's possible.
No horseplay, no running, and especially no talking.
Moment by moment.
Ms. Mclarty, your students' behavior yesterday in the lunchroom, it was terrible. Next time, silent lunch.
Did you hear that? Stay in line and catch a bubble. I'm not playing.
If this is education, we're in trouble. Bye, Miss Mclarty. Frederick Douglass said, once you learn to read, you'll be forever free. The way it is now, 2 of the 3 of us will never be able to really read. It doesn't have to be this way.
Hey, Jordan, how you doing? Good.
Everyone we meet throughout our day can make a difference.
I've been waiting for you to arrive.
All the difference.
Good, how are you? Great. Hi, Jordan. Bye, Jason.
Good morning, Jordan.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Good.
Go ahead and put your number in.
Talk with us, not at us.
That's okay. I'll look it up for you. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Okay.
All right. Have a
Teach us what we need to know.
good morning.
That's how we get smarter.
Well, good morning, Sophie, Janicia, and Jordan.
And when you talk with us and teach us, give us bigger and bigger words.
Now what I'd like you to do, children, is turn around and converse with your neighbor and discuss where the mother might have gone.
Words that we can use to read and understand.
She is prey for eagles, so she hunts at night.
And that will take us places we could never reach without you.
Remember, we're entering the learning zone. Now, how can we show our respect to the children and teachers who are working?
We can walk quietly.
Yes. Okay, kids, so what I'd like you to do is continue writing your narrative, documenting your emotions if you were the baby owl and your mother abandoned you in the nest.
What can you do? Learn all that you can so that you can challenge us to be our best.
You would have stayed and assisted them in whatever they needed.
Share yourself with us and show us how to share ourselves with others. Give us courage. Give us compassion. Help us find our own voices so we can become who we are meant to be.
Why would you want to silence us?
So you can see that students don't walk into our doors with just their academic selves, right? That would make it a lot easier if they did, but they are coming in as children with a lot of varied needs, and when we are looking at these needs and creating a plan, we try very hard to have a multi-tiered system of supports approach where we know and acknowledge and provide those additional supports in tier 2, like small group counseling, or through special education and intensive needs in tier 3, or mental health counseling through tier 3 intensive supports. But if we only focus on remediating and reacting to those needs and we don't focus on prevention, you will overwhelm the system and you merely simply won't have enough resources to address all of those needs. So we have to focus on good core instruction and best practices to create a healthy school climate. When we do so, we create a plan and really look intentionally about what needs to take place for our teachers, our administrators, our students, et cetera. And with this plan, we provided this plan to you last year and we talked through it, but it started with our administrators and our educators providing specific training around adverse childhood experiences and trauma-informed practices, and then specifically teaching them about what social emotional learning is and how do we teach this and integrate it, just like that teacher did in the video. It was integrated into her lesson. Once that is done, we ask that schools have a team to reinforce that type of instruction so the adults feel supported. And then after that, we focused on student curriculum and student instruction. And we were very deliberate about making sure it was within that timeline. Unfortunately, COVID accelerated this plan. So if we hadn't had COVID, we would have taken this a little slower. We would have made sure that schools were ready. And in fact, we were able to discuss this information and provide this type of instruction to most of the elementary and middle schools prior to this past year, but high school was the last to come on board, so it was a little bit of a lift for them, and we knew that. So in knowing that, we had to really think through what this would look like and what the curriculum would be for our students. So prior to that, just like I said in that last plan, we provided information to teachers and all educators on ACEs. And this has been an ongoing effort in the last 3 years. And we know from Children's Trust that approximately 3 out of 5 students in South Carolina experience at least one of the ACEs listed on the left. Now, we talked a moment ago about homelessness. That is not on there, but it still creates the type of toxic stress that these other ACEs would create. COVID is not on there. You know, there are many things that aren't on there, but what we know from the research is that when students undergo and children undergo this type of adversity, their bodies and their minds undergo toxic stress, and that impacts their mental health. It impacts their learning, so their ability to focus, their ability to think critically, and to retain information. It directly impacts how they come to school and whether or not they're going to be able to absorb what they're being taught academically. It also impacts their behavior. Every single time that I have gone into a school and worked with the staff and asked them, have you seen any changes in behavior within the last 3 to 5 years? Every single time the teachers say, yes, we are seeing more reactivity, hostility, and aggressiveness, or the opposite. We're seeing students more detached, less motivated, and more apathetic. And so they have felt unequipped to address that. And that's what our plan was intended to do, to give teachers the tools and resources to really mitigate those issues. The last thing you see on here that ACEs impact are the ability to form healthy relationships. Just think about any time you have gone through adversity. It is those healthy relationships that have helped you get through the adversity. So we needed to be more intentional about making sure students have those healthy relationships. Now, fortunately, there's a lot of research about how do we mitigate those ACEs. We can help students in these areas. And it is clear over and over that we have to create protective systems and we have to promote resilience. This completely overlaps with the goals of our strategic plan. The research says we have to intentionally teach individual capabilities, emotional regulation, perseverance, self-efficacy, and we have to embed it in a safe and connected environment through consistent, healthy relationships. The research also says that when you do it well and you follow best practices, you will see not only gains in social emotional skills, but you'll see gains in attitudes, you'll see gains in academics. You can see that last bullet point, 11 percentile gain in academic standardized tests. And then you'll also see improvements in behavior. So of course, that means a reduction in conduct problems, emotional stress, and even less drug use. We also see an impact when having an SEL approach on adults. You find teachers that stay in education longer, so it promotes teacher retention. And it connects to not only student performance while they're children, but healthy adult outcomes. So with the research on social emotional learning, there has been devoted effort to really inspecting what districts are doing it well and what they have done in terms of best practices. The first area that they have found in the research is that the lessons that you provide have to be sequenced, they have to be engaging and active, they have to focus on specific skills, and you have to have explicit instruction. The next part of it, you can see you have to partner with family and community. That is critical. They are involved as much or, well, really more in the development of students and their children's social emotional well-being. The final three elements, the research is clear, that you have to do this on a daily basis, that the students have to receive this instruction with teachers who interact with them each and every day. It has to be a school-wide effort. It can't be isolated. So you can't have just isolated lessons on it. You're just not going to see any generalization with that. Students have to hear the instruction from their teachers. They need to see it modeled by their teachers. They need to hear teachers incorporating it into their academic lessons. And they need to have this instruction provided within the context of a stable, healthy relationship. So with people they know and feel cared for. Whenever we look at the research, we go to many areas, but the leading organization on the research for social emotional learning is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, and they've identified 5 main competencies. And so we spent, before we developed that plan, we spent a year looking at the research, talking to other districts, really making sure that it was a thorough plan. And these 5 main competencies we wanted to make sure we addressed. So self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And what we decided was to adopt the Rethink Ed Curriculum, and that was for this past school year. Part of the reason on the second to last bullet is that it aligns so well to those 5 competencies. The other reasons for adopting this curriculum was that we knew that it was going to be a difficult year for teachers last year, and we really wanted to reduce the stress on teachers. So this curriculum has the instruction embedded in it through videos. Teachers didn't have to create the lesson plans. They didn't even have to provide the actual topic instruction. It was provided to them through videos, student videos. Teachers also had videos that they could watch prior to so that they would really understand the concepts. The other part of the curriculum is it provides the lesson plans in completion. So it provides questions that teachers can lead students in with questions around reflection of the topic and discussion questions. And then it has an activity. Remember that research that says that you need to be actively engaged with the content? There's an activity for every topic. And the last link is the link on our GCS website so that parents can directly view the lessons, because we wanted to make sure that they could see the lessons and reinforce those lessons at home. And I've had multiple accounts of parents emailing me and saying, you know, the type of content that they've been able to reinforce at home. The actual content that we adopted for this past year, because we didn't want to take on the whole curriculum, that was too much. We wanted to start small. So this is the content that we provided. These are the topics. So understanding strengths and learning styles, emotions, self-efficacy, knowing how to handle stress and handle difficult emotions, knowing how to focus, understanding ways to take care of oneself through self-compassion, through mindfulness, which helps them to identify their brain state and calm the brain, and things like empathy, identifying support systems, and respecting not only themselves, but all of the other students in their community. Finally, developing their social skills, their communication skills, conflict resolution, and respect to others. A big part of our plan was in also looking at how does this align with what we have been provided by the state. So we started with, and I just have some examples of state standards around college and career readiness. And this really is our focus, especially at the high school level, and we're going to heighten that focus even more for next year, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But you can see how the social emotional learning skills that I've talked about are completely embedded in our state standards for ELA, for social studies, and for health. So the same things I just talked about: identifying emotions, developing perseverance and self-reliance, recognizing, similarities and differences in our wants and needs. It also completely aligns with the profile of the South Carolina graduate. This was adopted by the SCASA Superintendent's Roundtable, and it was created by them and adopted by all of these committees and organizations. So what the Department of Education did was to look at, does this align with the CASEL competencies? They did this for us, and they were able to look at whether or not each competency aligns with their standards within the profile of the South Carolina graduate. So each of these slides just shows the level to which they align within the individual standards. So here's self-awareness, self-management. You can see that the vocabulary and the topics overlap significantly. Relationship skills and responsible decision-making. And just so you know, the check marks show direct alignment, and the half circles show, the key is on the first page, a probable outcome of developing those skills. So here we are at the end of this year and having implemented Rethink Ed Curriculum. And throughout the year, we really wanted to know what students and teachers and principals thought about the curriculum, and just thought about overall, what are we doing with social emotional learning? Because it's not isolated, it's integrated into the school day and into school-wide climate. One thing we did was to get input from our principals from elementary, middle, and high school. We collected input from teachers. We had a very thorough conversation with Inter-High Council. They were very direct with us, and they were great to talk to us about their feedback about the curriculum. And then we conducted a survey at the end of the year. The results of that survey are going to be presented to you at the August Committee of the Whole meeting. But we used the information from the input from the survey and other resources, and we looked at, do we need to make any changes for high school? And we decided we did. So we're pulling in teachers, and we've already started with a group of teachers back in the spring, and we're pulling them in this summer to be more intentional about aligning to college and career readiness, because the students said they wanted it to be a little more relevant to their age and what they felt like their needs were. The typical high school, and they're right. And so we're listening to them. And we're also having students give us input about these new lessons, and that will be presented as well. So part of the question and request that was presented to us around this topic was the relationship to critical race theory, and whether there is one, and if we're teaching CRT. Before we get into what the state has said about critical race theory, or if they have said anything, we just wanted to preface that information with a little bit of the origin and definition of, or tenets of, critical race theory. So the origin was back in the late 70s, early 80s in multiple law schools, Harvard, Columbia, and UCLA. And the core idea is that race is a social construct, and it's not just an individual interaction, but embedded in legal systems and policies. And an example is the redlining of minority neighborhoods and denial of mortgages. There are also ties beyond the legal systems and other intellectual currents like sociologists and literary theorists who look at links with political power, social organization, and language. So, and that our source is Education Week, so you can look further at that information. So now we're going to just look at what the state says in the proviso around CRT or topics related to race and sex. There's currently no proposed legislation on the topic in the current legislative session, but there is indeed a budget proviso in effect, but it does not directly reference CRT. What it does is to say that we cannot spend monies on any professional learning or instruction, instructional practices, instructional materials to any of these concepts, okay? So I'm going to give you a moment to look through these. I'm not going to read these to you. I have personally vetted and viewed every single lesson in the Rethink Ed curriculum, even the ones that we did not teach, because you know, we knew that those were accessible as well, and we could potentially be using, you know, those lessons in the future. We had a team looking at the videos, looking at the lessons with an understanding of this proviso, with an understanding, you know, of the concern that is in our community. We were very thorough in looking at our videos and our lessons, and feel very confident that we have followed what has been expected of us from the state. We are not teaching what these monies say that, you know, or the proviso says that we cannot put monies toward, and we are not teaching critical race theory. I do want to call attention to the final item, and it says that there's nothing saying that that the state is going to prohibit professional development training related to unconscious bias or the context of teaching literary or historical concepts. Now, I will tell you that those topics are not in the Rethink Ed curriculum and the lessons that we are teaching, but and we are not requiring teachers to go through that instruction right now. But there are some opportunities for teachers to engage in professional learning in that area. These are my references. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Hampshire. Dr. Royster, do you have any comments?
No, sir, other than to make a note back to, you know, Ms. Hampshire shared the definition as best it can be determined as to what critical race theory is. And I don't see included in that specifically, but it's the idea that everything is viewed through that lens of what is spelled out there. We do not teach critical race theory. We have never taught critical race theory, and there is such a theory. Now, I believe there are people who use this term very broadly. I'm not sure what their definition is of it, but this is actually what critical race theory encompasses and includes, and it's generally speaking used at the graduate level, I think almost exclusively in law schools, but not completely, probably in some political theory and social theory, but at the graduate school level. And in fact, I think even an informal poll of the graduates of one of those particular schools cited some of the attorneys that were schooled at that particular university had been through that course and others had not. So it's not even necessarily required at the law school level where it has been apparently in practice for some number of years to offer that course, but it is not something we teach, not something we've ever taught, nor is it anything we intend to teach.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. Ms. Leventis Wells, you put the item on the agenda. Do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Meek. First of all, Dr. Hampshire, I wish everyone could hear you speak on this topic, because across the state, there is such a misinterpretation of what SEL is. And I having been chairman during 2021, have been hammered because I approved it. And I tried to explain that when we were working on the strategic plan and it was improved, SEL was not interpreted the way it is today. And it hasn't, it all changed maybe a year or so ago. So the mentality across the state is you're for CRT and you're for SEL, and I'm saying that's incorrect. But because I voted on it, it makes it look like I came up with this. If people could hear the way you presented this and the reason why we implemented these things, then maybe they would have a different view. But because they're so narrow-minded, and other parts of the state of South Carolina and surrounding are utilizing, some people are, I can't say all, some are using this as a way to incorporate this new ideology, SEL, into the classrooms because of, and I highlighted this, because students respect and they trust their teachers, and the teachers want them to emulate themselves through their ideology. And then they put this doubt in these small children, these young children, to think, well, maybe something's wrong with me. And I hate that. It just eats at my heart. Now, I'm going to ask, I'm going to come back to you, okay? And just know I have great admiration for you and respect. And I appreciate your delivery and the way you came across in the meaningful terminology of what we're doing. So, Dr. Royster, critical race theory is not a part of the South Carolina standards on Greenville County schools' lesson plans and classroom instructions, or are and have been built. It's not taught in our schools. Now, the Proviso, the South Carolina Assembly included Proviso number 1.105 this year, which was 2021, this year's spending plan. It uses the language meant to ban the teaching of CRT and classroom, blah, 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 blah. Does that mean this new proviso that's in place recently, the 1.93, takes the place of the 1.105? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
All right, right now, excuse me, right now, 1.93 would be the proviso in place.
Right.
Because it was put in place for the FY22 budget year. Provisos expire with the budget. However, having said that, they also can carry over with the budget, either in its entirety or in a different form. And I'm gonna defer to Julie, who tracks the budget, obviously, for us and the actions of the General Assembly when they're in session on a daily basis. But right now, we would be under the tenets of this proviso. I would imagine they're re-upping that proviso, Julie? Word for word? So what is now 1.93, whether it continues to be 1.93 or not, that proviso in its 22 language is in the 23 budget.
That is correct. And a lot of provisos that carry over, they just get renumbered.
Okay, good.
So this will likely have, you may not know what it is yet. It may not be 1.93. It might be 2 point whatever. It may have a different number, which we can send to the board. When it has a number, we can send that forward.
Okay. All right, so thank you for that clarification, because it bans CRT in our state of South Carolina by saying no money is going to be given to schools and school districts can be used to teach concepts that show, for example, an individual by virtue of his race or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously, unconsciously, or an individual should feel guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his race or sex. So that will remain, is that correct? Because
Yes.
that is the one that I received, 1.105, but we'll get a new number to it.
Yeah. And
The General Assembly meets tomorrow to accept the conference committee report that was agreed to by the conference committee on Friday.
Yes, ma'am.
And that proviso remains and will be presented to the House and Senate tomorrow.
Thank you, Ms. Horton. I appreciate it.
without speaking to every individual word in each of those 8 items,
Yes, sir.
to do, because it prohibits doing certain things, to do most of those things would violate one or more of your own policies regarding how teachers teach, how they approach instruction.
Well, good. I want that.
They would violate a lot of your anti-discrimination policies.
Yes, sir. So, Dr. Hampshire, I wanted to ask you, the thing that I hear from teachers in elementary and some middle, that they just don't have time. They aren't certified in this area to teach this. And they barely can get their instructional material taught during the time of day. So why are we adding this addition where they have to study and learn all of this? And I mean, I want to keep our teachers. I want them to be happy, but we keep giving them things that it's not in their certification persona, that they learned English, they learned math, they learned that. This isn't part of what they signed up for. So why are we asking these teachers to take added on responsibility during the day when they've got so much that they need to do already?
There are a couple of things there that I think we need to look at. Number one, this needs to be done with individuals, to the best of our ability to do so, who already have and are building relationships with students. In fact, you may recall when we went through accreditation the last time we went through that process, one of the areas that we got that needed improvement was students not having a relationship built with a caring adult in the building. So that's one. The second is the belief that this is something outside of what they do. That's not a correct assumption, I don't believe. If you look back through all of this, I don't have the screen there in front of me. What we're talking about is good teaching. If you look at the tenets of good teaching, getting to know your students, exhibiting concern and care for those students, recognizing the individual differences, i.e. one size of instruction does not fit all. All of these things that are included in here, they may not be on the subject matter side of teacher preparation. However, they are on the educational practice, theory, and application side of what teachers do. These things go directly to improving classroom instruction by ensuring that you're engaging students appropriately, that you're working towards building the skills that are necessary that don't directly relate to understanding how to work a math problem, but to all the other aspects of being a good citizen or being a good employee or being able to further your education when you leave us. it is an investment in a teacher's time and effort that ultimately will make their job easier, not more difficult. And I think that's the approach we have to take in how we look at this, a bigger picture other than that it is putting something else on a teacher. But one thing, quite honestly, our best teachers were doing a lot of this already. They didn't necessarily use the same term for it. It didn't perhaps have these same 25 tenants or however many there are. But our best teachers, if you look back through there and you think about the best teachers that you worked with as a teacher, as you were a teacher at one point, or the best teachers your children had, or the best teachers that you hear about from your constituents, they exhibit these qualities and characteristics. And that's what they were already doing and have been doing. I've done this a while now. This is 42 years. So when I started in 80, there were teachers doing this in 1980. And some of them have been doing it a while. Now, they didn't know what these terms would be foreign to them if you resurrected one of them out of retirement right now. But when you start talking about what that looks like, oh, I did that in my class. So this goes directly to improving instruction and helping to make the connections that were pretty well illustrated in that really short video. Everybody that child ran into got them off on the wrong note in the first half of the video. The second half of the video, they got them off on the right note. Which one had the greater chance of success? If those had been two different young men instead of the same one, which one would have done better in school that day and every other day? The one that had the second scenario, or at least a mix of those people, along with the ones that maybe didn't acknowledge him to any degree. So I think that's the way we have to look at this, is it's a tool to enhance teaching, enhance instruction by better engaging our students in the process.
Well, my take on that is teachers should be professional, and they should already have that professionalism instilled in them and the professional development that they go through with the district. And they should already know without having to teach this every day and have to work on this and implementing it in their lesson plans. Because, Dr. Royster, it's a different day and a different time, and things have changed. And when you start giving some this tool to help implement their values into a student, I have a real concern over that. Because sometimes we do things for the right reasons, but there are others who have their own agendas. And I personally have a concern when we're doing this. Now, my next question is SEL at the high school level. So many have experienced different things. Can students opt out of that SEL delivery?
Well, first, we're revamping SEL at the high school level. Secondly, students can opt out at the high school level, and parents can opt out at every level. The other point that we need to make sure that we clarify is this is a small group of lessons, numbering how many, Ellen?
So at the high school, they did 10 lessons this year.
Elementary and middle, how many?
Oh, so elementary 18, and at middle we did 12.
So it is not an everyday instruction. It is periodic throughout the year. The lessons are short. The idea, though, is to inculcate these into teaching practices over time and helping them to build and foster those relationships. And while, again, I believe our best teachers are already doing this, and we have a lot of very good teachers throughout the district, but not every teacher is doing this. And it's not necessarily being imparted into every student, even by our best teachers. And it is not an opportunity for teachers to communicate their values to students. There's nowhere in here does it talk about that. The values that are included in here are the values that have been adopted by the State Board of Education, the South Carolina Education Oversight Committee, the Department of Education, and in fact, this school district, of the things that need to be taught. And if you go back to the profile of the graduate, and you look at, it's hard to go back to the actual profile. You might, I don't know if you can make it bigger or not, but it talks about the skills there, creativity, and let me turn it back to where I can read them off my page.
Integrity, perseverance.
Creativity and innovation, critical thinking and problem solving, collaboration and teamwork, communication, information, media and technology, knowing how to learn. Those are the values that this is working to instill, really characteristics. And you see the characteristics at the bottom: integrity, self-direction, global perspective, perseverance, work ethic, interpersonal skills. You know, recognizing everybody's not the same, people are different, being able to get along with all kinds of people, working hard, persevering through things that perhaps are difficult for you, being able to direct yourself in what you do, and acting with integrity. Those are the values, not some teacher or principal or counselor or whoever's individual personal values, but these values, these skills, these characteristics.
Could I just add that when a teacher takes the time to really understand and teach these skills, what they find is that it actually saves them time because their students are ready to learn the academic content that they're teaching. They're not dealing with behavior problems. They're not dealing with students that aren't focusing and are distracted by, you know, outside types of issues. I have a little letter, a note from a teacher about a middle school teacher, how each day she would take time with students with the information that we had provided her, and it allowed her to check in with her students, to recognize what her students needed day by day, to be able to intervene and prevent an escalation of issues, and that she couldn't speak more to how much she valued that time within her day. And that she could draw upon the lessons that we provided so that to equip her better to really speak to those students.
Well, Dr. Hampshire, I'm just going to be honest with you. I understand. I get it. I've been a teacher, and I know how important it is to establish that rapport with your students. And what I'm saying is there are great teachers out there that are doing exactly that. And there are, you know, you heard Michael Jackson's song, "One Bad Apple Spoils It for Everybody." And there's some out there that are a couple of bad apples out there. And they are sending the wrong message. Because I understand the reason why we did the social emotional learning. When you spoke of the physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional, mental illness, etc., that's why I approve this, because we do have all these situations where parents divorce, separate, domestic violence, and these students, they're seeing it, they're experiencing it, and it's a reaction for them. And we're implementing these programs because with my law enforcement background, I get this. With people who are living everyday lives, who have, you know, everything's great, no problems, they don't understand this. And they don't understand, and those that have never been in teaching, never been in a classroom, have no clue what teachers experience. And I try to explain to them, and then they twist it, just like some of this subject matter gets twisted into the wrong interpretation and delivery into the classrooms. And sometimes you cannot get your point across to someone that doesn't want to hear what you've got to say. every time you deliver, you validate why I did what I did. And I really do not like the way things are perceived today. But because of the negativity and the misconception that's out here now, they hold us responsibility for every little thing. So when Dr. Royster said the parents can opt out of everything, I just wanted to make sure that's on record so these parents are aware, because they go, I've never been told that. Well, now you've been told. Now you have that option. It's your choice, and I'm all about choice. It's your choice. And if people could just talk to you, Dr. Hampshire, this would be a better world. And this would be a better understanding in the state of South Carolina. Because I really believe we're doing things for the right reasons. SEL has got the most negativity ever. And I'm thinking, how can we change this name to where it comes across? Because when we developed the strategic plan and we had all of these people participate in this in 2017, 28, and implemented it, what, in 2018?
19, I believe, was the first
19.
year implementation.
You know, back then, this is exactly what it meant. So now, like everything else, diversity, inclusive, inclusion, all of those words have different meanings too. I found that out. And it's a shame now that anything you say or do, people are gonna find fault. But I'm glad that parents can opt out. I would love, since this is only being delivered in 12 times in, middle school, high school, 18 in elementary. I wish we had more guidance counselors in our elementary schools where the guidance counselors would have this set curriculum and they could go in the classrooms and with the teacher there and deliver the material. Instead of taking time, a good teacher would implement this without any knowledge. An interesting teacher would implement it with a twist to it. And that's where my concern comes in. When the twist enters in today's society, that's what we hear about, not the good it does, but how bad this is in this class. So I thank you for your presentation. Let me see. I know this, I'm going to give it my best shot here, and I understand where we're coming from, but I will tell you, I'm trying to pull this up. I don't know how we're going to do this, but I'm going to make the motion to no longer require regular classroom teachers to teach the SEL curriculum. And I'm sure it's going to get voted down. It might not even get a second, but I'm going to do that. And then once it gets voted down, or maybe somebody will make a substitute motion to it and say that
have you made a motion?
I'm making the motion. Any seconds?
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
That's what I thought.
Is there a second?
I'll second if we can consider a substitute.
There's a motion with a second. Any discussion on the motion? Ms. Doolin.
I appreciate this presentation so much. Oh, let me get my mic. Thank you for being here for this presentation. When you said that you read the entire curriculum for every grade, did you find any racial components?
So there are some lessons that we didn't teach last year that talk about respecting oneself and respecting all cultures and races and students with disabilities, et cetera. So in that regard, yes. But that's something that we wanted to hold off on and have a team really look at that before having those lessons taught because of the community questions. So does that answer your question? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But did you also find anything related to gender identity?
No.
Because there, when there are the tiny pictures, and then in the presentation, it said what each picture meant in the crosswalk images.
Oh, yeah.
It says understanding my identity, and that seems kind of vague. So I just wondered if it was racial or gender identity.
Right. So identity being recognizing. Here it is.
Objection, I'll extend for 10 minutes.
Okay. So that's actually under the profile of the South Carolina graduate is understanding my identity. And we can send you, they have hyperlinks to a specific rubric that gets into that more in depth. It's not under the Rethink Ed curriculum. That's a really great question. But what that is referencing, so it says sustaining wellness. So recognizing, and I'd have to look at it further, honestly, because I haven't memorized the profile of South Carolina graduate rubric. But we could look at that. But that's, like I said, it's not in the curriculum, so I wasn't prepared to speak to that part.
That's okay. Yeah. Dr. Royster, can you remind us how much the Rethink Ed curriculum costs annually?
It is $3 per student.
It's paid up through, Char, do you recall, two years out?
3 years.
3 years out. So we've already used one of the 3 years. It was advanced purchase through ESSER funding related to mental health and well-being of students.
Well, if we own this curriculum for 3 years, but the high school has decided to revamp theirs, will the staff and teachers be creating new curriculum?
What we're doing this summer is I've pulled in a group of teachers that principals had selected to give input at the end of the year. And those teachers have decided to come in and help me with specifically developing a new curriculum. So teachers won't have to develop it themselves. Does that make sense? Like next year?
Yes. The answer to your question, yes. Developed by our own teachers.
Yes.
And we would then pursue a credit based on the fact that we were dropping the number of people utilizing the curriculum.
Do you think that we could do that for high school this summer? And obviously, we would want to compensate those employees for giving up some of their summertime to create.
That is exactly what we are doing.
Yes. Could we also talk about doing that for middle school and elementary school?
At this point, we don't believe we have the capacity to do that. The judge of that will be how well doing the high school one goes. Then it's possible we can do that at the middle school level and the elementary level.
And the feedback from elementary and middle has been very positive about the curriculum. I don't know if I established that.
I've heard the same thing from elementary and middle,
But until we do the high school, we don't really know how well that will go, how much time actually it's going to take. And the high school, the feedback we got from those students was such that if we don't have that ready by August, we're better off not doing anything with them until we get it ready. So with the others, to the point that was already made, people seem generally satisfied with it. So we don't want to endeavor to change it, one, until we know if that's something we can reliably do over a short period of time, which is basically 8 to 9 weeks over the summer.
And part of the plan for the high school is not just the explicit lessons on social emotional learning, but starting with giving teachers activities to build relationships. So their advisory time, the first, several times will just be those types of activities. And then they'll have some time to be prepared to provide some of those specific lessons. The other thing we did was to narrow down the focus so that they didn't have as many topics to cover. So that was just from the feedback working with a focus group. And they felt like that would go a large way into helping teachers to be prepared.
Well, it seems like if it's possible to develop our own curriculum for high school, we could also do it for middle and elementary and then alleviate the cost of Rethink after the 3 years. If our curriculum ended up being excellent, we could also sell it to other districts that wanted a more pure form of SEL rather than some other?
No, actually not if we develop it on the public dollar. We would be limited in our ability to market that to others because we use taxpayer resources to develop it.
We could still share it.
Yes, we could share it, yes.
Thank you.
That's what's important.
That's what I was getting at. The biggest complaint that I've heard is that there's the perception that there is some data mining going on with the children because they have questionnaires and surveys. And again, if it was developed in-house, that information wouldn't be leaving because it would stay with our own employees. Can you talk about that for a second?
Any data that we share is subject to a data sharing agreement. Those agreements are approved through Mr. Webb's office, and it tightly constrains how the data can be used, by whom it may be used, and in what way it may be used. We have to share data all the time, but we tightly control how it's shared and the purposes it can be used for. And in this case, they cannot use personally identifiable data. Now, we do have some data agreements where, by virtue of what has to be done, it does have some personally identifiable information, but this doesn't even have a name on it.
Okay, well, I still think in the future going forward, if the high school revamping curriculum turns out well, I think we should consider looking at the other schools as well.
We'll certainly look at that going forward, but it would be a blend of, do our teachers and principals still believe it's effective? Do we believe that we can effectively and efficiently write one over the summer? And at the high school level, very different from the elementary level and somewhat different from the middle school level as far as the availability of personnel in the summer, with the number of summer tutorings, summer school, reading camps that we're running, at least right now. So there's an availability in there as well. So those are just things that we need to know more about based on the experience we have with rewriting high school.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ms. Doolin. Anyone else have any questions? Ms. Wells, before you start, I'm going to extend for another 10 minutes. Okay. Ms. Wells, go ahead.
I don't hardly know where to start because this feels like this is all over the place. I've heard this isn't what teachers sign up for. This is about data mining. This is about people don't understand our curriculum. We don't like our curriculum. So I'm trying to kind of hone in on where I need to be, I guess, to deal with this motion. So I do want to say, because perhaps some of us have forgotten some of the stuff we've done on the board, or maybe weren't as engaged in it, or weren't paying as much attention to it. But you can go back to December of 2016. We adopted, this board, as part of our character education policy, we adopted the profile of the South Carolina graduate. And we had conversations about that profile at that time when we were hearing from businesses and hearing from families that our students can't learn, and part of it is because they can't navigate, they can't communicate, they can't understand how to adjust when they're in different situations. So, all of that, if I had to, I'm not sure why I would go across the state and talk to people about it, but if I had to do that and people were asking me or saying you need to defend decisions that you made and what your board is doing, I can lay out this timeline of a foundation that we've built in response to what is a very real crisis that didn't just start with COVID, but started, I don't know when. It was when I got on the board, 12 years ago, it was happening, right? So I feel like there's a little bit of, there's political football here that people are trying to they are kind of assigning, here's a thing, and you are doing this thing, and we need to get rid of this thing. And social emotional learning, the curriculum is one thing, the learning piece is something totally different. And if we start talking about telling our teachers, well, you don't have to teach social emotional learning, they aren't going to be able to teach. And for all these folks that are saying, well, yeah, we're at the bottom of the rung, which is a whole nother discussion I could have about how those rankings come about, but when you're having that discussion, we aren't going to help our children be able to accomplish what they need to accomplish. They're not going to get better at reading and writing if we can't figure out how to get to them. You know, I mean, my dad, as a Pentecostal minister, knew you didn't talk to everybody the same way. You don't come from the same point because everybody's on a different part of the journey. Yeah, you got to reach them in different ways. So I just want to say, if we aren't deliberate about addressing the social and emotional needs of children, and if we don't make that a priority, well, and you know what, for our teachers too, if we don't have a priority on saying the relationships are important and make that the priority in the classroom and in the school and in the district, we aren't going to be putting out citizens that can be better citizens. So there's that part. So I would just want to say that, because I do feel like with that character education piece, which you guys, it's IDAB, if you want to go look at the policy that we have and the specifics that we say, because we do say in the policy that this is something that is going to be integrated. I pulled it up at one point so I could look at it again, but we say character education, see, that's what we were calling it then, 2016, in Greenville County Schools shall be meaningful, challenging, and integrated across all subject areas and all aspects of school life. So if you don't like calling it social emotional learning, call it character education. And we can do that. It addresses all these things, that's what it is. So the fact that we've included profile of South Carolina graduate, the fact that this is part of our strategic plan, and I've appreciated Dr. Royster reminding us that we got that feedback from that advanced ed survey that said there are a lot of students who didn't feel like they had a caring adult in the building. And that doesn't feel good for the student. I don't think it feels good for the teachers. If you are a caring teacher and you're doing your best and you see other teachers around you that don't have that same heart, they need to be a team too. So I don't really believe trying to separate and saying, well, here's a curriculum. I tell you what, here's a book. You go read about social emotional learning on your own time, and then you come back and bring it to the classroom, and if 8 of you don't want to do it, that's okay. We'll just keep teaching you reading and writing. This is just not going to work. So I don't like it when we have motions that are brought to the board without a lot of homework that we would be able to do to figure out how can you make it work. Certainly we have board members who have concerns and we need to address them, but this is twice in the last month that someone has put a motion up kind of saying, well, I'm going to put this motion up and then y'all figure out if it works or if it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, you just vote it down, and then I'm going to go leave the boardroom and tell people that, hey, I tried and other people voted it down. I'm not, that's not how this board needs to operate. So I'm not supportive of this motion. I am supportive of having a conversation about what we need to do to better provide our message to the public, to families, to students. But I don't like motions that come forward that you can't implement that without divorcing yourself from all the work we've done over the last 10 years. So, I had a couple other questions sort of just about some of the feedback, and I guess maybe I'm going to hold that to see what the rest, what it looks like this is going to do. But if we have an opportunity, I'll follow back up, and if not, Dr. Hampshire, I might ask you about some of that feedback on the high school curriculum piece. Thank you, Mr. Meek.
Mr. Lewis.
I also have some concerns with the wording of the motion. First of all, I think it's in conflict with state law. You know, it's fine to go back to the profile of the graduate and say this is a non-binding thing, but you know, South Carolina Law 59-17-135 is about character education, and it specifically directs school districts to implement character education programs within their schools. And in Section B, it says, each local school district shall deliver a program that includes focus on character traits, including but not limited to respect for authority, respect for others, honesty, self-control, cleanliness, courtesy, good manners, cooperation, citizenship, patriotism, courage, fairness, kindness, self-respect, compassion, diligence, good work ethics, educational habits, generosity, punctuality, cheerfulness, patience, sportsmanship, loyalty, and virtue. And it specifically requires the school districts to adopt programs and policies that ensure that those services are delivered in our classrooms. So I believe that to have a policy that says we're not going to require teachers to teach social emotional learning in our schools would put those teachers who opt out of it in violation of our policy, and it would put them in violation of state law. And so I cannot comfortably support something that would allow teachers to opt out. I also see here in the rationale that we need to take it off teachers' plates, which I assume implies that we want someone else to do it. Well, when you look at an elementary school, we have 400 students to every one school counselor. And the majority of the time that school counselors are in the building, they're spending most of their energy on testing. So if I'm working 100 hours a month, let's say I'm working 120 hours a month, we'll give them the whole thing. If I'm working 40 hours a week and I've got 400 kids, then I'm spending 6 minutes a day, a week with each kid. And so the idea that we're going to take this heavy burden off of these teachers, which instantly, I have yet to have an elementary or middle school teacher tell me that teaching social emotional learning is something they want removed from their plate. But if we're going to somehow move it to someone else, we probably need to put it on someone's plate who's teaching more, who has more than 6 minutes a week to build a relationship with children. And so I think that either we're going to incur an incredible cost by reducing our school counselor to student ratio from 400 to probably something closer to 100, or we have to accept that the classroom is the most appropriate place for this to be taught, because it's where the General Assembly expected it to be taught. And it is where we trust our teachers to teach a whole host of things that we like to say they have no business teaching, but state law requires them to teach. And so I'm not comfortable with the wording of this. I'm also not comfortable with this equation of social emotional learning and critical race theory, because they are not the same thing. And in fact, if you look at the wording of the Proviso, the Proviso is in direct conflict with what we just read in law. The Proviso very clearly talks about how we don't want things that teach students that one student is better than another student. We don't want things that teach students that one group should be mistreated or is treated differently than another student, that meritocracy matters, that fault, blame, and bias should be the same. These are all anti-social emotional learning concepts. And so to equate those two is really the responsibility of the person who is misunderstanding it to have better information about the difference between the two. It is not this board's responsibility to educate the entire community about what we meant when we said social emotional learning, just because a group of people refuse to accept that critical race theory and social emotional learning aren't the same thing. And to sit here and say that we didn't know what we passed when we passed the strategic plan is just outright false. Now, there may be board members who weren't familiar with social emotional learning, and I certainly believe there are things in the strategic plan that some people know more about than others, but I 100% understand what social emotional learning is. I understand what its value is, particularly in the preschool and in the elementary school level, and I understand the impact that that program and those services have on helping students adjust in the elementary school level. And I knew when we adopted it that that was an essential part of what we do at the elementary school level. And so I'm certainly not going to sit here now and say that just because a small group of people have intentionally confused social emotional learning and critical race theory, that we should abandon all of the social emotional learning that we're offering in our schools that's valuable because a group of people refuse to be educated on the difference between the things that they seem to oppose.
Mr. Lewis? I'm going to extend for 20 minutes. Ms. Morrison-Fair?
Thank you, Mr. Meek. And I think I'm going to use some of my social-emotional learning to say what I have to say. First of all, I am so glad we have on the table that there is a difference between SEL and CRT. Cannot understand why those two topics are in the same discussion. Number two, I'm going to give people some food for thought. Teaching is all about building relationships and having students have the ability to get to the next level with the skills that they have. You cannot teach unless you have a relationship with your students in the classroom. You cannot even work any job unless you have relationships with your colleagues. So whether you call it social emotional learning or whatever you call it, you need to build relationships. And I heard the word, we have a few bad apples out there, and I have not encountered those bad apples in the parents that I've talked to in District 23 and other districts, have not encountered those bad apples. Because when we talk about social emotional learning, I rest my hat on the strategies. I rest my hat on the fact that we're trying to decrease the percentage of students who report feeling afraid, lonely, or angry while at school. Can't imagine a young person feeling that way without having an avenue to go to. We have 7 strategies, and for people that don't understand, maybe we should have small groups to teach those what we are calling bad apples, an avenue so that they can understand with social emotional learning the end results. I love it when it says it empowers all adults, teachers, custodians, everybody to establish a positive rapport with students. Who would object to that? Who would object to it? Stand up. I haven't had anybody object to it, so I have not encountered these people that are objecting to these ideas. Excuse me. So maybe we ought to put the word adults in place of these students, because maybe we have adults that are having some of these problems that we need to deal with. But the school board is establishing an environment so that we can raise our students in the safe environment and encourage them to use the skills and the gifts that they've been given so that they can survive in this thing we call life. And that's what I support. Everybody is not the same. So you can't just take a broad brush and paint everybody the same. And you have to be humble and compassionate, especially if you're a teacher. So, Mr. Meeks, I appreciate this opportunity to give my thoughts. And I want to end it with, I'm glad we have it on the table that SEL and CRT are not the same, should even be talked about in the same sentence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison-Fair. Mr. Suddeth.
Is there any component of CRT in SEL? Any component of this, any at all in SEL?
No, Mr. South.
No, they're not. All right. What is the difference between character education and SEL?
I'll let Ms. Hemshire elaborate, but I would say that many of the same components are a part of both. I remember as a teacher, when I taught at Bryson Middle School, we taught character ed then. All the things we're talking about now, we taught those things then as a math teacher. I was a math teacher, but I also had parts of my day where I did the very same things we're talking about doing now. So I don't know if Ellen wants to add to that.
I would say you couldn't really create a Venn diagram of the two with, they would completely overlap. But character education is a part of the overall social emotional learning framework. So the lessons taught in character education are just organized so that we have very specific information from research on how do you teach it, how do you sequence it, which vocabulary to use, and in what context to teach it. So it's just giving more research and understanding of best practices to teach character education. Does that make sense? Okay.
Why are we teaching both character and SEL? What's different about them?
I would say there's no difference. That
so SEL is really kind of building on character.
Yes. You said it better than I did.
So there's a need for both of them.
Correct. I mean, they're really the same thing. It's just organizing it.
I was looking at social emotional learning. Is strength-based developmental process begins at birth and evolves across the lifespan. Is that so? It is the process through which children, or adolescents, and adults learn skills to support healthy development and relationships. Is that it?
Yes.
Adult and student social and emotional learning competencies include self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Is that the same thing as what we have here?
Yes.
In teaching SEL, what part of that is taught by parents? What part is taught by the guidance counselor? And what part is taught by the teacher?
All parts are taught by all of those people, I would say. And you have varying degrees of ability to and knowledge to teach that as a parent. I know I have learned considerably and am a better wife, parent, and colleague because of what I've learned through SEL. And my husband will tell you that.
So SEL is taught through kindergarten through grade 12.
Correct. And preschool as well.
And repeat for me one more time, how many lessons we have in elementary, how many in middle, and how many in high?
We have 18 in elementary. We have, I said 12, it's 13 lessons. The 13th was for schools to use their data to determine how to focus the 13th lesson. And then high school is 10 lessons.
High school is how much, ma'am?
10 lessons. 10.
How long is a lesson in elementary and how long is a lesson in middle, or how long is a lesson in high school? Or do we have it set up like that?
All the lessons are 30 minutes. We told the schools to plan on a 30-minute time period to teach the lesson.
How much training have we given the teachers to teach part of it?
We've done considerable training. So that's where the plan that I discussed was around, and I discussed that we've done a lot more with elementary and middle, but we provided that adverse childhood experiences training and trauma-informed practices. Sorry to have to flip, boop, there it is. So that's the top part of this plan or this roadmap. So we did that first, and that really helps the teachers to understand what students are going through and how it impacts their learning and their brain development. And then we did training on what is social emotional learning, how it's organized, the vocabulary around it, and just simple ways to include it in their school day. And then we provided modules for ongoing training that counselors gave. We developed that training so that counselors were able to take it back to their school staff and do activities with the schools to reinforce that information.
Is it possible to get a sample of a lesson in elementary and one in middle and one in high?
Absolutely.
To get an idea as to see exactly what we're talking about. And I don't care which lesson, even on the 3 levels in that regard.
Do you mean like right this minute?
No, we'll get that to all of you,
We
Mr.
will get
Sutton.
that to you.
Trying to understand,
Yes.
We'll get that out to all of you.
what we're talking about. And I think the last thing, if I recall correctly, is that did the district approve of SEL?
Yes, sir.
That's all I have. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. Ms. Bush.
Thank Ms. Levinas Wells for actually getting some discussion out, because I think the whole point is the communication and the misperception, and in a heightened political climate, it is so easy. I mean, as board members, we dedicate a lot of time. I have no doubt that there's any of my colleagues that comes that are not prepared, that don't do research, that don't look into concerns from constituents. And so it does become frustrating when through social media or through that heightened political climate, that things that that I feel like we have invested such time and resources and our whole process through, whether you call it, whatever you call it, social emotional learning, that's the phrase of today. It used to be called character education. And it's required, as one of my colleagues has said, we are required by state law to provide that. Because you think, what kind of society would we evolve into if there were none? And as one of my colleagues said, how much is taught by parents? How much is taught by teachers? How much is taught by... It depends on the home. We have some homes where that is from birth, that child is taught to share, to respect. We have other homes, unfortunately, we just got a book here about look at your schools. How many kids are homeless? How much character education do you think that those children, when they're struggling just to have, where am I going? Where am I going to spend the night? What am I going to eat? Where is my next meal coming from? Where am I going to take a bath at? Just simple things like that. So thank heavens that the fact that there are rational adults that are going through processes like we went through. We involve the community. We are obeying the law. And I just don't want a heightened political climate for people to just boil all the actions that this board and other people take to protect and provide for children into one vote. Did you support this? That you supported something that is or is not what they conceive, and let's drive like we have. I know we've extended the time. We're behind but this is such an important discussion, because if we don't continue to have these discussions, who is going to inform people what we are really talking about, what we want for the children of not just Greenville County, but what we want to share for the children of not only South Carolina, because when our children leave South Carolina, when they leave Greenville, when they leave high school, they're going to be going to colleges, they're going to be going to careers that they have to depend on all of these things that some of them may unfortunately not have gotten when they were at school. And let's not, as we all heard our mother say, let's don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So those few bad apples, I have no doubt that they can be dealt with, but let's not focus decisions on if everybody can't do it right, and think about all those children just like Jordan, that get on the bus every day, that walk through school, that what they're going through in their little lives, and especially what the pandemic has done, and the isolation of children, and the stress, and what, not just elementary students, but our high school students, how it just destroyed they're being able to be around their friends, being able to be on sports teams, being able to be in extracurricular, their entire lives for the last 2 years. So I think now more than ever, we need to have those supports in place for those students. And my question is about the feedback about this being a more critical time than ever, that we need to have those relationships, because in our prior meeting, we just discussed and approved spending money to make our schools safer. And to me, this is directly related to the safety. It is one of the things that we can invest in, to where those relationships, if you look at those profiles of school shooters, they're isolated. They were bullied. They felt like they had nowhere to go, no one to, and someone has to pay. And those are those not in direct, those are things we're trying by what we're doing with these lessons. Those are relationships we're trying to establish, so that we are building a better graduate, not building a better assassin, not building a better the next school shooter. And that's what we're doing when we greet those children and we learn what an impact. Can I ask you to speak to that, as far as it being directly related to, especially the isolation that we've gone through, that not just the normal isolation and the normal bullying and being in a clique and the pressure that teenagers are feeling with social media. And it obviously shows, because our last 2 school shooters were 18 years old.
So your question is about speaking to the correlation between those 2 areas?
Yes, between the safety of our investing. This is not just helping students be better learners, but investing in that.
Yes. So, and Dr. Royster has spoken about this in the past, that one of the best ways to prevent a shooting is by making sure that students, if they see something, that they're going to say something. And the way that you can promote that is by having that kind of a relationship with a student, that they feel like they can come to you, that they can trust you and talk to you. So when you have time specifically devoted to the development of the mental well-being of children, that sends a clear message to our children. It sends a clear message to our parents and our community that we are trying to, we care about our children, and we care about their mental well-being. And so that message and building of that kind of a climate is what's going to help negate the issues that you were just speaking to, that isolation. And we have definitely seen a difference. I mean, there were parents and teachers who spoke to this last school year when we had 9 suicides. 9 suicides. I mean, that was significant evidence around what students were going through with that isolation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Meek, I'd like to make a substitute motion and I did talk with Dr. Royster, substitute motion to require employees to adhere to the current proviso language forbidding CRT in Greenville County schools. I'd also like to thank Dr. Okay. Substitute.
Substitute motion to require employees to adhere to the current proviso language. Oh, it's off. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was off. The substitute motion is to require employees to adhere to the current proviso language forbidding CRT in Greenville County schools. Well, that's Ms. Leventis Wells' motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the substitute motion? Ms. Leventis Wells.
I'd also like to thank Dr. Hampshire for your presentation, because it was phenomenal, as it was when you spoke at the South Carolina School Board Association. I got more out of what you said than anyone, so I thank you. And Nancy, thank you.
And I thank you for your support. I'm going to extend for 10 minutes. Any comments, questions? Ms. Bush?
So this would just be basically saying that we are saying don't break the law and teach something that we're not teaching.
Well, just for clarity.
Yes.
I believe the intent, and I believe the net effect of the motion would be that to reinforce compliance with the proviso as drafted. I believe that's the intent.
That's exactly it.
Ms. Wells?
Do we have evidence that we aren't upholding the proviso in the district?
And then I'm aware of, Ms. Wells.
So the effect of this, we're reinforcing something that doesn't need to be reinforced, is what it, maybe that's a rhetorical question. I guess I don't really believe, to one of my colleagues' points about the bad apple, the concern with bad apples, we have a code of conduct and a standard of care and what I believe is a very robust process for issues that are happening in the classroom if a teacher is doing something that's not appropriate, for that to be addressed. And I believe that's used quite often, that process. So I don't see that this doesn't seem to be a significant, an action that reflects that this board is doing something vigorous or significant or improving public education in our schools. So I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Mr. Lewis.
Yes, just a clarifying question to you, Mr. Chairman. The agenda item here is social emotional learning. But now this motion is specifically about critical race theory, which I thought we have established is not at all the same thing as social emotional learning. So I'm curious from your position how this motion, which is on something that's really counter to social emotional learning, would be an appropriate substitute motion to one that's connected to the agenda item.
Mr. Webb.
I think that the question really is whether the proviso and what is contained in the proviso is any way related to social and emotional learning. And I think that's going to be the question, whether it's in line and appropriate to make a substitute motion. And so that is the chair's discretion, whether that is connected enough to the original agenda item for it to be in order.
Mr. Chairman, could we possibly pull up the proviso since it's in the presentation?
We're going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you. While I ponder this. Pondered enough, I guess. I'm going to allow the motion. I think it's close enough. And so the motion on the floor is a substitute motion to require employees to adhere to the current proviso language forbidding CRT in Greenville County schools. Glenda, you were next. Derek, are you finished? Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the current proviso is 1.93, and that proviso will expire when the new budget is approved, correct? But it won't be proviso 1.93. It's not the current proviso.
It could be unless they renumber it.
So if it's renumbered, it would not be the current
But right
proviso.
now, it is still currently 1.93
So
in the
next
conference
week,
committee report.
this policy wouldn't apply because it's not the current proviso. So we're not in school, and we want to pass during the summer something that will force teachers not to do something for the next 5 days because we don't even know whether that proviso will pass yet. So we're working on a proviso that's going to end when the new budget is approved.
You finished, Mr. Lewis? You finished? Okay. Ms. Morrison Fair.
I'm trying to understand the substitute motion. So we have a motion originally on the floor about SEL. And now we have a substitute motion on the floor concerning Proviso 193. Is that right? I just want
You have it just a current proviso saying the current proviso is what the wording is.
Okay.
It doesn't say 1.93, but that is the current proviso.
current proviso.
And,
But
and,
that's
and,
the
and I'm sorry, the way that I interpret that, legally speaking, is that current proviso, because it's a budgetary item that automatically expires July 1, even if it's renewed into a different verbiage or different appropriations, that it will expire at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, but where I'm not understanding is this substitute motion is completely unrelated to the motion on the floor.
No, I don't think so.
You don't?
Wasn't fair. No, I think it's related, and it was in the presentation, so I think the motion itself is okay. My thinking. Now y'all can vote it differently if you want to challenge what my decision is and let the votes decide.
I was just trying to understand how the two motion and substitute motion related. Okay, I'm good.
Okay, Ms. Bush.
I'm trying to decide. Excuse me. I'm trying to decide because although I support the intent of this, which is to support the current proviso, but because of it being tied to the budget and being that we're now in a, do you see a way that we could do this, or do we just need to table this and have some discussion about addressing, because as I said again, this is that political climate of communication and people linking those two together. And if this board, if we can have a part in our community in saying explicitly that you know, sending that message of that we are following the law, and that I understand what Ms. Levinas Wells wants is this extra support of stating once again, we want teachers to follow law, and it also gives the superintendent the opportunity to deal with those bad apples, because if someone is doing that, which we have had parents here, we've had people speak before the board that have given us specific incidences where it has happened, and I don't doubt that those have happened, but I don't doubt that that the administration at those schools and Dr. Royster cannot deal with those people by saying this is not what we teach. This is against the state statute. This is also reinforced by our board that they do, that for me to enforce that CRT is not taught in our schools. Do we need to work on this and bring it back and get it right? And also in that process, be able to have more of this discussion about the communication of what you know.
So my view, Ms. Bush, is twofold. One, you are certainly correct, and let me reinforce this, that the school district, the board, has to comply and does comply with this proviso, and all laws and provisos for that matter.
Right.
Secondly, given the timing of July 1 and not knowing exactly the verbiage or whether this is going to be carried over or what, if it's going to be the current proviso or a different numbered proviso, that is a very real possibility, and perhaps a good approach is to consider this down the road at a future board meeting.
All right, and so also, so if I move to table the substitute motion, then we would need to, then it brings us just back to the original motion, which we would need to table.
No, it would table the whole thing.
It would table the entire, I just wanted clarification on that, because I want to do it not out of opposition to it, because I don't think anyone on this board opposes following the law. But I want to do it out of respect that this is not an issue that's going to go away. We need to be able to discuss it, and we need to be able to, but I want to do it responsibly and not in a responsible climate, not in a political climate where we are just doing something, but and it 30 days. I mean, 30 days that it could. So I would rather us come back in the fall and look at what we can do to give our superintendent the tools to even more reinforce that we are following the law, and any teacher that does not follow the law, just as any laws, not just CRT, but that this board, it stands behind the superintendent and any actions he has to take to be able to make sure that that happens. So I would like to move to table.
Wait a minute. Well, I'm going to extend for 10 minutes. Go ahead, without objection. Excuse me again, you do it again?
Yes, and out of respect for my colleague, and as I have said before, I greatly appreciate the fact that we are sitting here on an election day, having great discussion about things that are, that need to have better communication in our community. And so I move to table it so that we can have better discussion and come back at a later time.
We have a motion to table. Is there a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Doug, is that debatable?
No.
It's not debatable. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to table. No discussion. Y'all want a roll call? You want it? Yes, do a roll call, please.
Mrs. Bush?
Yes.
Mrs. Doolin?
Yes.
Mrs. LaVentus Wells?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mrs. Morrison Fair?
No.
Dr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Suddeth?
No.
Mrs. Wells?
No.
Mr. Meek?
Yes.
6 yes, 3 no.
The motion is tabled. The next item on the agenda is 3.02, summary report of the 21-22 student grades. Mr. Davies.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. McDavid has pulled together a summary report to give you all a comparison for the 2021 school year compared to the 2022 school year. I think she's also going to share with you information relative to brick and mortar students and virtual students. So Dr. McDavid, thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share this update today. At the end of the 2021 school year, we had a discussion about the number of students who had received failing grades in our schools during and at the end of the worst part of our pandemic and after our closing. You asked us to follow up this year with the progress of our students after really the pandemic subsided. So this is a report given as a result of that request. Our goal 1 is to raise the academic challenge and performance of each student, and in order to increase the rigor and expectations in both instruction and assessment across all content areas, we share with you the progress students have made in the number of failures in our schools. Compared to 2020-21 and 2021 and 22, our brick and mortar students have overall reduced the number of students with Fs. If you will see at the elementary level, the total number of Fs remained at 4%, and the total number of students with at least one F went up by 1%. At the middle level, the numbers remained consistent in the brick and mortar program throughout, with 2% of our students scoring total Fs and 2% with at least one F. At the high school, during the pandemic, brick and mortar, we had 8% of our students total Fs and at least one F. And post-pandemic, the number in the brick and mortar represents 6% of our students total Fs, 7% with at least one F. In the virtual program, we see a more significant reduction in the number of total Fs and the total number of students with at least one F. That is a percentage represented because the number of students varied so greatly from 2020-21 to 21-22. If you'll recall, we had over 26,000 students virtual during the height of the pandemic, and this year we held at around 3,000 students. Last year at the elementary level, we had 15% of our students receiving total Fs, 13 with at least one. That reduced to 8% and 6% respectively. At the middle level in the virtual program, 18 and 21% of our students total Fs, and students with at least one F in 21-22, that is reduced to 8% and 7% respectively. At our high schools, we saw 22% of our students failing, and with total percentage of Fs reducing in 21-22 to 18%, with the total percent of students receiving at least one F, that remained the same at 22%. So this lets us know that as we continue to serve our students and continue to try to meet their needs, we have fewer students failing in the brick and mortar and in the virtual program, as well as fewer students overall failing between 2021 and 2022. That is all.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Have any more?
Nothing. We'll just entertain your questions, Dr. McDavid.
Okay.
Here, and I'll try to help when needed.
The item is for information only. Any questions or comment, Mr. Lewis?
We take a little deeper dive into this slide here. So it appears that the total percentage of students with at least one F in elementary and middle school improved significantly, but it did not in high school.
That is correct.
So what do you think is the cause for high school not showing the same types of improvement that the other two showed?
We have explored the fact that our model differed in 2020-21. Our high schools had teachers who were delivering the virtual instruction. In the 2021-22 school year, we have a group of teachers in the virtual program delivering the instruction. We have offered some students the opportunity to take courses at their home schools virtually, and some of our instruction is synchronous as well as asynchronous. At the elementary and middle school levels, we have the majority, almost all of our students taking synchronous classes with virtual teachers with a regular schedule, and they are receiving that instruction face-to-face from teachers online.
I don't fully understand though why. I don't fully understand why we wouldn't see a change in high school.
That is something that we are examining with our teachers and staff. Mrs. Taradine has a committee of administrators and teachers looking at the actual Fs and which courses they were aligned to. Preliminary conversations pointed to students not submitting the assignments as they are being given online. Again, the synchronous instruction, we do not use an online program for the virtual program high school version. We use teachers, students showing up face-to-face every day for most of the high school. There are other opportunities. ELA and math were predominantly the areas that students failed at least one course. And in the there were a couple of areas that we've addressed individually with courses or teachers. We do not have, to your question, a response to exactly why the students are not, but we are investigating that. These scores came in after the last day of school, and we wanted to give you this report as we had promised at the end of the year.
I think I heard you say in there that the primary reason is because the students are not turning in work.
That is correct.
So it's not their attendance, it's not their ability to pass in the course tests, it's that assignments still aren't being turned in when they're virtual.
Yes.
So, we talked about that 12 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So what strategies are we providing teachers that will be different for 22-23 to ensure that work is getting turned in?
As we move into 22-23, we have already instituted a system of screening students or applicants to determine which students are best fit or better suited for virtual instruction. When the students signed up with their parents, the virtual staff and guidance counselors screened the students to look at their grades, their attendance, their historical records, even in terms of behavior when it comes to academic work. The team submitted some recommendations back to the principals for those students who may not be well suited for a virtual program of instruction. With that, the high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools had a chance to weigh in and have follow-up conversations with parents because it's a parent's choice. Those follow-up conversations with parents resulted in some of our students going back to the brick and mortar setting. So with that, in the upcoming school year, whereas we had in 2021-22, 3,000 students who will be going virtual, for the upcoming year, our numbers represented as to be more like 1,800. We still have students who are taking the virtual full assignment as part of their home-based or homebound assignment, so that if they have other reasons that they cannot be in school, they are being assigned to the virtual. And there are some students for whom in-person discipline is a challenge, and those are also being recommended to the virtual program. Ultimately, it is a decision that we work with the parents to make as to whether or not the student goes virtual, but we are instituting more conversations with our dropout prevention specialists, our counselors, and our administrators, given the students' academic records.
Thank you. Ms. Morrison-Fair.
I just have one question. Do we have opportunities for the high school level students to be in both virtual and brick and mortar? I know at one point in time they had to choose either or.
Currently, we are expanding opportunities for them to be in a hybrid model, and wherein we are not able to offer every course with the number of students we have in the virtual program. So we are allowing them the opportunity to take a class asynchronously. That is, they receive the assignments, they can view the recordings, they can work with the teacher to do their assignments without having a face-to-face opportunity every day. So yes, we do.
Right, thank you.
Boards and Fair, Ms. Doolin.
Thank you. Have there been any changes to the criteria for acceptance into the virtual program?
Our initial criteria was, of course, during the pandemic where we accepted all students. During the 21-22 school year, not only did we look at the timeline of acceptance, but we also had that screening process that we put in place. If we saw at the end of each 9 weeks, we had conferences, just like we do in brick and mortar. We had conferences with parents and those who were not being successful. We conference with those parents about going back to the brick and mortar setting. Those, again, are conferences. We do not kick students out, if you will, but we have conferences. In the upcoming school year, we did the pre-screening, so that will change our criterion. And with the pre-screening, if a parent is adamant, or if there are other special circumstances, we at this point have not prevented anyone from joining the online virtual program, but we have had extensive conversations from the point of screening to acceptance to talking with the home-based school and then following through every 9 weeks.
Are there any other schools or programs where parents can be adamant that their children attend even though they don't meet the criteria for acceptance? Such as Sterling School or Fine Arts Center or just another school location?
I say parents are adamant. There are some special circumstances, especially medical, for mental health purposes or reasons. We've had a number of parents to submit letters stating that their children need to be out of the school environment and in a virtual setting. There are opportunities at the high school level for other virtual choices in the state, but our students who choose to remain in Greenville County schools have an option. But in terms of our magnet and choice opportunities, I would have to check back with our planning and demographics. However, the answer to your question is no. There are no other programs in which a parent can just say, that's not what I want to do.
It's just really alarming that it's 20% of high schoolers are failing a class when their in-person classmates, I mean, their grades are significantly better.
Yes.
Do you know if it's parents who are there are still parents who are choosing this knowing that their child has a better chance for success at an in-person class, or do you feel like this is the best is going to be for those students, even though there's a 1 out of 5 chance that they might be failing?
I think each case is unique for the parent and child and for purposes that parents are choosing. At the elementary, we know that our parents have an adult at home with the students during the learning and the teaching that's taking place. We know that the middle school, they are more often with some sort of an adult or a guided session. At the high school, our students are working more independently in their virtual setting at times, so we do not know that they have that ongoing feedback and input with the parent. Our goal is to communicate with them, and I think post-pandemic, we may be able to put greater restrictions on it. However, our initial introduction of the virtual model was during the pandemic, and we did want to, as long as there were requirements in the schools that parents were not comfortable with, as long as there were things that they did not or had reasons that children should not be in school, we did not want to take that away. Again, we have a lot of our students who are doing homebound instruction are now doing homebound through the virtual program, receiving essentially more hours of direct instruction than they would with a person coming to their house for 5 hours minimum per week. So there are other things that we need to look into the demographics and the placement and the decisions for the students who are at that 22%.
I know we talked about it last year after seeing how poor the grades were in the virtual program about strengthening the criteria for acceptance or having sort of an application process. So I think if grades aren't improved at the next year, I think that's something we really, really have to consider.
To be able to require them to go back to the brick and mortar setting. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, Ms. Doolin, you asked that question. We have, as you know, policies, rules that kind of govern how we handle change in assignment, magnet programs, all those things to include, special exceptions, appeal processes all the way through. So we would just have to look into that case by case to see, but I think that's the broad answer to your question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Dr. Stiles.
Thank you. Dr. McDavid, first I wanted to just share with you that I'm very encouraged about the elementary and middle school improvements. And I feel like that that your team really listened to the board last year when we had the discussion about really engaging the parents and letting them know if that's a positive, if virtual school is a positive choice or a negative choice for their children. And I feel like that is, and you've already alluded to that, part of the impact there. I really agree with that, and I thank you for that. And I also think that we're probably becoming more proficient in how we do virtual teaching. And I know we're continuing to work on that professional development. I just wanted to touch on the high school just a moment. Like everybody else, of course, that is our area of concern with the virtual program. And like Mrs. Doolin, I hope that at some point we can come together and say for students whose parents have been encouraged that this program is not working and we're continuing to see failures, that at some point we draw the line and say, sorry, you can't participate in this anymore. But at the same time, I also wanted to share that I'm really encouraged by the fact that you said we're going to look at this number and we're going to explore exactly, what caused this? What's the root cause? How can we be better? How can we be more effective? One of the things that I would like to know in looking at those students who had the failure, who are they? I'd like a report on their demographics. Are they students with special needs? Are they students who had a history of failure when they were in the brick and mortar schools? Some data on that I think would really help me to really understand that a little bit better. Like, who are those students? Help me understand who they are. And also in looking at that, I just wanted to say that I hope that we're not only going to look at, and ask the question, what went wrong? But I hope that we look at all of our high schools. And I'm sure we have some high schools who did really well in this area. And I hope we'll ask those folks questions like, what went well? How did you do this? What were your best practices? And then that we will collaborate and share those with some of the high schools who had the highest number of failures. So thank you for delving into that and looking into that, and thank you for what you're doing in this area. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. Ms. Wells.
Thank you. I'm going to follow along with what Dr. Stiles has said. I think this really isn't enough. We're drawing conclusions,
Yes.
and we haven't really been given enough data to draw conclusions. So I think we do need to see a little more, I'm sure you guys have it, but maybe share with the board a little more thorough understanding of what's going on with these students. I look at virtual school not as a special academic program like a magnet program, but more like the change in assignment. And I think it needs to be an option for parents for any number of reasons. If it's health related, mental health related, traveling schedules, activities, special needs. So I really want us to dig in and figure out how to get it right. We had a lot of success with our virtual offerings before the pandemic, and those were targeted, but that was growing in what we were doing. So we were really getting some things right. I think the numbers on elementary and middle would say that looks pretty good too. I'm not sure why we'd put any more controls in place because we don't know why have these students chosen virtual? And we're assuming, well, they would have done better if they were in brick or mortar, but they might not have done better. So I guess on the high school, help me understand. I think you kind of said it, but this year we delivered high school instruction, no scheduled time. Your lessons are online. You go do your lessons. How do we do that?
This year, we had the majority of our course offerings face-to-face, not face-to-face, but via Zoom. So you were expected to log in, to sign on, to be actively engaged with your teacher during the block of time in which that course was assigned. We also wanted to give students the ability to take some of the course, specialized coursework, like weightlifting, for example, if they needed to go back to the site to do that. So there were students who did some work back on site. So we had somewhat of a hybrid. It was not a full-time commitment that if you went virtual, you could not set foot back in the classroom, because there are some offerings that we wanted students to have. We, again, were looking at taking this because the demographics, the demographics will be part of it, but we also have other things in terms of the reasons they were placed, the relative dates of attendance that students were present during the active sessions. And we did take attendance during every live session. When students were not present, we enacted the truancy guidelines. Those students who are over 17, however, know that they don't fall under that. And so for the high school, there were a total of 1,003 total students, and we looked at the fact that there were 216 of them with at least one F. So that is where that percentage is at 22% with that number. But we're looking at not just that, but the courses. We noticed one elective course in which the failure rate was a bit higher than some of the other elective courses. So we're going back and revisiting that with the students, so with the teachers, and looking at what were the mechanisms by which students were expected to submit that work. Were there any barriers that need to be removed for our student submission? It is a very deep question. So with this data, we want to give it to you. We had this on the agenda. When we got the data in, we crunched the numbers, but to give you the more in-depth answers as to how we are, what we're doing well and what we need to improve upon, we need to look almost at individual students, again, why they were placed, when they were placed, because there's no clear way. If they came and they were sent, or if they transferred in May, or in April, and there were a few who were, those final grades ended up with our virtual final grades. So we want to look at a whole picture of what happened, where were the students, those 216, to give you a more in-depth look at them.
Well, and I think it's really important because I think this has to be an option that we continue to offer. We talk about choice all the time. This is a choice. This is a flexibility that a lot of families need and can benefit from, and a lot of students might benefit from. And if people don't like the school environment for their kids, but for whatever reason, this is a good option. But we have to get it right and make sure the quality of our teaching is there. So, did y'all look enough yet to see is there a correlation between the attendance and those Fs? You know, they didn't show up for class at all, or very little. They had a lot of absences, and they didn't.
Our preliminary look does show a correlation between not just the attendance, but the length of time they've been enrolled. So we want to follow those who've been enrolled for, from the 45th day until the 135th day or the end of school year. Let's look at those who've been there all year. There's just a lot more we need to look at in terms of how long the students were enrolled, how many days they attended, have students when they stop coming or when they stop participating, because we do struggle when students have that moment at which they determine, I might not pass, so I'm not coming anymore. So we've done the outreach, but we have to look almost student by student to see what other patterns emerge of those 216 high school students.
Okay, and I'll jump another question about that. You need to extend. I just want to ask this one other question. And so, two questions. You're going to get back to us in August with more detailed.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that right? Okay. And so then you mentioned this, the students that came into the program very late, are they ones that were transferring into our district? Or are they ones that were in a high school and they got transferred out of the high school?
There's a combination.
Okay.
There are combinations. Some did come to our district later in the school year, and in coming in, they opted to be virtual, and that was given as an option at the school.
Okay, so I would just want to, we need to get this right.
Yes.
And if we've got money, we've got this funding that we could utilize to really dig in and provide extra supports to students right now to transition to get it right. I'd like for us to do that instead of just continuing to ratchet down who can get in until we get to the right kids, right? So, thank you, that's it.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to extend for 2 minutes. Ms. Leventis Wells.
Yes, Dr. McDavie, I too have, I'd like to know why we have to know why these children are failing. Is it just a convenience, and who is it a convenience for these children to be enrolled in online virtual? Because is it the convenience of the parents because they're traveling and they just need their kids to stay home? Or is it because the children were just used to staying home for about a year and they just don't want to go back into, a school, a brick and mortar school? Or what is that? And then how do we move these children from failure to success? When I'm looking at these numbers and I'm looking at 2021 and then 21-22, I see that elementary is 15%. Of that 15%, or these 8% that are in 21-22 the same children that were getting Fs in the prior year, and all the way down the line? Because if they were already failing in 2021, then I don't see how there's very little success that they're experiencing if they are the same children that were in those percentages and they're in this next percentage level. And that's where I have a concern, because my thing is we had all teachers, everybody teaching in that virtual program when there were 26,000. Now in the 3,000, we should have proficient teachers that understand virtual, and they should be able to meet the needs and be successful in teaching these children, and know not to give them YouTube videos and and keep busy work. They should be engaging and hands-on and in their face all the time. And so I too want to know how many of these students have been signed up for
for two concurrent years of virtual.
Okay, so this coming year we have how many?
1,800.
1,800. So then I want to know if there's been progression from all three of these. The same students that were in 2021, 2022, 21-22, and now going into 22-23, are these the same students that keep staying in the program, and why are we allowing it to happen if they're failing as it is? That's all my questions. Thank you. I know we're out of time.
Thank you. Anyone else before we break for lunch? Mr. Sutton.
Dr. McDavid, we've got 26,000 versus 3,000. Do we have the number of students instead of the percentage?
We can share the number of students instead of the percentage, yes, sir. But given the percentage, gave it the same relative amount. So with last year's, while we had 1,003 students total in the virtual at the high school level and 216 with at least one F. The year prior, we had 6,042 students and 1,340 students with at least one F. So we will share the numbers with you that correlate to these percentages, but the way to look at them and compare them relatively on the same playing field, we gave percentages only. But yes, sir, we can share the numbers with you.
See the numbers.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That completes our section for instruction. We're going to break for lunch. We'll be back at 12:30. Thanks, everybody. Okay, we'll continue with the administration part. Ms. Mosley was unable to attend, so I'll keep going. Next item on the agenda, 4.01 Payroll Frequency. Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Stack, Ms. Clemens are going to do the presentation for you. We've been looking into concerns relative to our brand new hourly employees from the time that they get employed until the time they receive their first paycheck. It's been a lengthier time than what we feel like they should have to endure. So those groups have been bus drivers, fans workers, custodians. So Ms. Stack, her team, HR have looked at a way that we can offer those employees some options relative to the way that they can get their pay a little bit quicker, especially at the beginning of their employment. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Stack. Ms. Clemens, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Davey. HR and Finance are tag teaming on this presentation today to let you know about a new program we're going to offer to employees that, as Mr. Davey said, would let them have access to their earned wages prior to a payday. So here we go. Concerns identified. The entire payroll process has had the result of up to a 4-week delay for some employees to receive their initial paycheck. And that is really dependent on when the hire date occurs within the pay cycle. The impacted groups, the majority are the bus drivers, custodians, and fans operators. Now, the delay with the employee receiving their first paycheck can create employee dissatisfaction and retention concerns for the district.
Some options that the district explored. We reviewed our internal system configuration needed to make a weekly payroll cycle possible. We partnered with a consultant to explore weekly payroll options. And we identified a component via our current time and attendance vendor, Ultimate Cronus Group, or UKG, to provide earned wage access. As we were looking into the weekly pay implementation, just to give you a little background, we started looking into our internal processes back during the 1920 school year when we implemented UKG or Kronos. And in February, we went live with the new Kronos, but then the pandemic shut us all down. So trying to get back on track, we began working with our first consultant group in July of 2021. During this review of the system and looking to what we needed to do in order to implement a weekly pay cycle, we discovered numerous roadblocks that would prevent the weekly payroll from being implemented with the current system configuration. We hired another consulting firm and went through additional options of what we could do. And really the same results. We have a system complexity, and we also allow our employees the opportunity to work in multiple positions. And the biggest roadblock was that you either needed to be paid on the weekly cycle or the semi-monthly cycle. And in order to work around those system complexities, it would have increased costs significantly to maintain that weekly payroll process, which would have incurred recurring costs due to needed extra employees and additional processing cost. So what is UKG Wallet? UKG Wallet is an earned wage access program that allows eligible employees immediate access to pay following worked hours. The access to wages is administered by Pay Active, the program administrator for UKG Wallet.
Employees eligible for EWA as defined by active employees with current time records created by either a system work or schedule of actual clocked punches. It was developed within the last 10 years and quickly gained widespread attention. In 2020, there were 55.8 million EWA transactions, totaling 9.5 billion. Particularly valued by employees who experience a delay in pay or who need access to their wages before payday.
So how can UKG Wallet help? Well, for our employees, it eliminates the delay of the first paycheck that they may incur at the initial employment time. It reduces financial stress because they can access some of that pay before payday if needed. It uses a convenient mobile app. The company also offers financial resources that the employee can take part in. It also has the ability to set a savings goal if the employee chooses to participate. And then there's built-in discount that are in various companies that are in their marketplace. For the district, it helps us attract and recruit scarce talent. This is what you see a lot on signs: work today, get paid tomorrow. Reduce staff turnover and lower absenteeism, as employees would hopefully not be out looking for another job because they're not getting paid when they want it.
So how does it work? Employees work their shift and they clock in and out just as they normally do. Earned wages are automatically calculated daily and made available via the UKG wallet. Employees can access some of their earned wages as needed and pay bills sooner. The paycheck is adjusted for wages accessed through UKG.
All employees, for all employees, earnings would be available for access and displayed in the app. Now, they can access up to 50% of earned wages to a maximum of $500 per pay period. Earned wage access funds that they do access and fees are then deducted from the employee's next paycheck. The employee can choose to direct funds to the UKG Wallet Visa debit card, deposit it into a bank account, directed to pay bills, and can also be scheduled for cash pickup at a Walmart or withdrawn through an ATM. Now, for new hire employees, they will receive up to 3 next day transfers during the first month of their employment at no cost. The district is going to cover the $1 fee, which is what it costs, for up to 3 transactions for new employees. Employees earning less than or equal to $40,000 annually. Now, these employees will receive up to 2 next day transfers per month at no cost to the employee. And both of these options will allow access to wages before the next semi-monthly pay period.
For all other employees, it's free if direct deposited to UKG Wallet Visa card, a $1 fee for next day bank transfer. Fee ranges from 99 cents to $2.99 with a cap of $5 per day per pay period for cash pickup, instant deposit, or bill pay. Employees with garnishments are not eligible to participate in the program. For the district, there is no cost to offer the program. Customer support is provided to employees 24/7 by PayActive, the program administrator for UKG Wallet. GCS will subsidize the fees, new hourly employees, and employees earning up to $40,000.
So what's next? We did a pilot implementation that began in February, and we offered the use of this app to new hires in the hourly work groups. The participation rate was 10%. And since that time, other employees in these work groups have expressed interest in being able to use the app as well. Beginning July 1st, 2022, UKG Wallet will be available to all GCS employees. New hires will receive enrollment information through orientation and will also receive an invitation through our GCS email to enroll. Now, current employees will also receive an email announcing the launch of the program in July. Questions?
Thank you, Ms. Stack. Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Ms. Stack. Ms. Clemens, again, just another option for our employees who want to take advantage of that option. Of course, it's not mandated that anyone take advantage of it. It is simply another option to allow employees to have access to their funds as needed. So we'll entertain any questions that you have.
Thank you. Any board members have any questions or comments? No questions, no comments. This is just for information. You're off for the light start again. Thank you all. Next item on the agenda is 4.02, Strategic Education Plan Draft Reporting Format. Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. As Dr. Mclarty is coming, just to set this up for you, Dr. Mclarty is going to put basically a monitoring system in front of you that would allow all of you and anybody else looking at the 156-page document, I believe, Dr. Mclarty, a way to look at colors, checks, balances, to see where goals have been met, progress along those goals, just to make it easier to follow how we're doing on the strategic plan. So thank you, Dr. Mclarty. Turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Davey. So we have both quantitative and qualitative markers within the strategic plan. Those are quantitative, primarily stacked in goal area 1. That's all of our student data targets and then our observed achievement levels. So based on previous conversations as we were going over this and talking about the strategic plan waiver, in the future, what we're proposing is to provide visual markers for you so you can easily see, instead of just looking at the numbers provided, you can easily see where we met the target or where we fell short, just via check marks and X's or crosses there. We will continue to highlight information, changes in information in yellow. And so this is an example of what meeting and not meeting the target would look like as we go back and apply this information to past data points. And of course, every goal also has multiple objectives and activities. And so for each activity, in addition to the state required continue, modify, finish, we're also going to mark those as where the progress is being met toward that activity or if progress is not being met. And so this gives you a summary of the visual targets that we'll use for quantitative markers. It'll either be met target or did not meet target, and then for our each activity in the strategic plan, we'll use a single check mark in green font to mark progress made toward finishing the activity. We'll use 2 check marks when an activity has been finished, and a red X if progress is not made toward finishing the activity. So it's pretty straightforward. We'll also provide summary information for each goal and overall so that you can quickly see how many goals were met within each area and how many we didn't make progress towards. Any discussion?
Dr. McCrory.
Mr. Phillips.
Mr. Phillips.
Open up for questions.
Okay, any questions, comments? Ms. Wells?
Thank you. This will make it a lot easier to kind of get through. The only question I have, or I'm going to look for some feedback on, is so for instance, the first one's a good example. This goal 1, performance goal 1, we said we want to be in the top 10 or higher on all those different metrics. So we met that. So as long as over the next 5 years we're in the top 10, we're good with it. Except you can look at elementary school and see where we slipped back from where we were. So there are two different things going on there.
That's right.
We met the metric of we're in the top 10, but we were 4th and now we're 8th. And so there's not really, if you're just kind of flipping through, because it's a big document, and you're looking for kind of what might I want to look at or think about, you would miss that. So is there a way to show, okay, we're still meeting metric, but we're not doing as well as we did a year ago or 2 years ago? And I guess, so that's the first question. Is there a way to show that so that you're still showing green, but maybe we're still not doing as well as we did last year?
There's definitely a way to show it. Every time we had something, it'll be a little bit busier. So how we define this is for each of these data sources, we have targets. And it's a matter of did we meet it or not. And so what I think you're talking about is, in addition to the target of whether we met or not, what's the trend for that target? Even if we're meeting it, if we're falling back, you would like to see an indicator of a trend based on the target. So yeah, it's going, just off the top of my head, I think it's going to introduce at least 2 different symbols. If we use it, that's why I'm thinking it's going to be busier, because we could not meet the target, but yet our progress could improve, and we could meet the target and our progress either improve or decline. So we're looking at just adding more symbols, and it could get busier. I can develop something, let you see it if you would like, just to see how it flows.
Because I think if we really want to use this to drive our priorities and our conversations over a 5-year period, then we should be looking at what the trend is, both so that we know we're making that progress, because we're not gonna, if you're 17th, the idea that you're gonna just get there in 2 years now is not high, right? So if the idea of this was to provide an easy way for the board to follow along and see what's going on, to me that would be somehow a way to sort of identify positive trend, negative trend.
Well, here's another thought. If you're looking at ways to consume the information, we'll also provide information like we have in the past around November when all the data come back. We've had a chance to analyze it. We provide trend information at that point across all kinds of measures that are directly related with, of course, state standardized testing that directly relates to the education plan. So we do provide trend data at that point. If you all are okay with not making the strategic plan as busy as it would get if we do both trend and target. So I don't know if that would be a good compromise, but we'll provide it in both ways. It just won't be in one chart or one graph.
Well, and I think you make a good point, because we had that data workshop, but there wasn't a presentation or a summary of information to consume and to go back and revisit when then it came time to approve the strategic ed plan. So while you guys have provided the information, it was disconnected in terms of the board thinking about what action do we need to take, because it was part of a workshop and what do you think, what do you want to know, and there was no action there with it. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of graphs and charts. I didn't feel like there was much of that attached when we had to approve the strategic plan this last time to update. So maybe taking that from the workshop, taking what those trends were and putting that in something we could review when we have to review the strategic plan would be important.
Sure.
So then just a follow-up question. I thought with the last strategic plan we did this, but maybe we didn't. When you have a 5-year strategic plan and you're revisiting it, it seems to me that it makes good sense to revisit targets. If there's, you had a target that you said, we think we can do this, and then something happens and you can't do that. And so you can adjust the target. Is that just something that, in the context of what the State Department of Education wants you to do, or even the way the administration thinks we should use the strategic ed plan, that we shouldn't be looking at targets and adjusting them either up or down? Because if you hit your target in the first year, do we really want to say, well, okay, we don't have to do any better for the next 4 years? So what is the thought process on updating our goals on an annual basis for some of these items?
In general, the strategic plan should be a living document. I would hesitate just to change a target. And I know you're not suggesting this at all, but I wouldn't change a target just because maybe we outperformed significantly that target, because something may have happened. I think we have to look at every target and every goal in context. When we do that, sometimes we recognize, well, they may have changed the cut score for an assessment, so now it's much more rigorous, and so percentages have declined. In that case, it might be appropriate to look at the data we have in concert with other information that we have from maybe across the state, and then make an informed decision. But in general, it's a living document. How we go about updating strategies. One thing that I think that Ms. Whitney and myself, that we're going to talk with the superintendent, and what we'll do when we start working on the new strategies, and when we start presenting that information to you all for consideration, is make sure that we've benchmarked other districts who we either aspire to be like or who are similar and are high performing. So we benchmark their information, see what kind of things they're doing, how they're doing it well. We include information from our strategic plan, those things that you want to keep, things that either might be no longer appropriate for where we are, or the vision for which you set for where you want to go. So all of those things and the strategies, how we set up the strategic plan for next time, will include both looking at the strategies we have now and those goals, perhaps removing them, eliminating them, or keeping some that you think's important for the next 5 years.
The process of changing as you go, is that something where you have the conversation each year when we update the strategic plan, where the board would say, hey, looks like we've met this goal, should we change it? Or is that something you guys are doing on a regular basis to say, hey, let's push the envelope, let's push a little harder, we've achieved this in 2 years, we have 3 more years in the plan? Because I feel like that's where we aren't using it as a living document. And I don't know whose behavior needs to change or whose actions need to change to make it more of the document and the roadmap that we know it is. Dr. Hampshire, she's not still in here, but she was telling me about how, and you have this in your strategic plan and you have that. And you just go, wow, yeah, people are really using it. But we're not interacting with it.
And I can see that from your perspective at a higher level, looking down. What happens, practically speaking, is each of the department heads takes their goal, breaks it out into subsections. The folks who lead the different departments under the department head, they have their strategies and activities that they're tracking. They have matrix as part of the strategic plan that they're tracking. And just like with academics, Dr. Royster has said on many occasions that average can't remain average. which means that when we talk about test scores, we're always wanting to improve and increase. So, like I say, he said on many occasions, that's just one example of the talk and the context behind making sure that we're always improving and making sure that average isn't average anywhere, but that average mark is always improving. So across departments, the strategic plan gets distributed. The people who have the most expertise in that area is reviewing it. They have matrix. They report on those matrix annually, and that's where I get the information. It's not just one or a small group of people. This is coming from the weeds back up to be reported to you.
How much more time you need? I'll extend for 10 minutes. No objection.
So, well, and I don't want to belabor the point. I'm just still trying to get to, it doesn't seem that the board is interacting with this and that it isn't a dynamic document. It hasn't changed in 5 years, or in 4 years, three years. Well, we adopted it, so we created it a year before this, right? So, and we need to be able to go back to it. So if you have a department that has a goal and they meet it, and so as far as the strategic plan goes, they got to pass. They still have a goal that's more than that, but that doesn't make it back into the strategic plan, I guess. So that's where I just would like some thought around how can the board better interact with and use the strategic plan to drive our work, our priorities, our decisions, and our interaction with the data. So, and if it's not this, we talked about this last time, if this isn't it, this structure is too confining, then we pull this data and we put it in something, an executive summary document at the front that's our living document. I mean, this is helpful, and again, I went through the whole thing, so this would have been helpful in me kind of flipping through and trying to look at trends, or look at good and bad. I would like the trend thing, and then just as y'all move forward, just figuring out, it's a lot of work, and it should be what pushes us all in the same direction, so. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Wells, anyone else have any questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Mclarty.
Yeah.
That completes our administrative part of the meeting. Next item is building and grounds. Ms. Morrison-Fair.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. Building and grounds, 5.01, facilities project. I will ask Mr. Dave if you have any comments before Mr. Carlin comes up.
I don't think Colonel Carlin has a formal report here. You've got the facilities project report in front of you. We'll be happy to try to answer any questions you have about any projects going on in any area of the district or on this report.
Are there any questions on the facilities projects report?
I don't want to be the only one to ask questions.
You certainly can ask questions. This is where we ask questions in the committee of the whole.
Well, I'm looking down through here, and we've got all the additions and renovations. We've got a lot of them to our existing schools, and I think we had said all of those are being handled by the architect that originally designed the site or designed the building.
Correct. And those, just for the benefit of the board, 3 of those projects are McMillan Pasden Smith projects, and the other 2 are LS3P projects.
Okay. So is there any significant site and or utility issues that I know most of the time we've designed, when I've seen the plans, when we have future additions, we just go ahead and design for the future addition.
Right.
But some of these, maybe not, just because of the age of the school. So
We're still really in the fact-finding stage on what is out there. I do know that one school, and I believe it's Mountain View, will require relocating the existing leach field, which we put right where the new addition needs to go. So that, I think that's the most challenging site that we're going to deal with these 5.
So from a utility standpoint, every other school, you have what you need there in terms of service, except for Mountain View. Of course,
Correct.
that's going to be
Yes, ma'am.
an issue. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Any additional questions for Mr. Carlin? Any questions, Mr. Neat?
I have one. The precast over Carolina
Yes,
that
sir.
was being restored, what is that?
So on all our precast concrete panel schools, and there's a number of them in the district, I believe we did East, why can't I think of it? The high school. East Side. Wow. East Side High School last summer. And what it is all those panels have a joint between the 2 panels where we go in and seal that with a caulk joint. So these projects that you're seeing with precast panels have to do with going back and replacing those seals at the joints as well as around windows and things like that to keep them keep the building envelope sound and tight.
But the concrete itself is good.
Yes, sir.
It's just
Yes, sir. It's just the maintenance portion of having that type of construction.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've seen some of them where kids stuck their fingers or pencil or whatever in those and make little holes. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Neat, Ms. Wells again?
Just one more on the playground upgrades.
Yes.
What it says pending. What is that?
So, basically that comment was getting ready for summer, doing all the things necessary so that the contractor can launch as soon as school lets out. And since this report was produced, they have started.
Okay, I just want to be sure there wasn't some supply
No,
chain
ma'am.
issue
Nope,
that was
everything's good on the
impacting that.
playground as far as we know.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Southern. Mr. Southern.
On the roofing at Blue Ridge,
Yes, sir.
we had bidded on it, but now it's gonna be rescheduled.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry to say that we are experiencing probably our greatest struggles right now with supply chain management issues in our roofing projects. We put a bid out on the street to complete the 2nd phase of roofing for Blue Ridge, and we were not successful in receiving any bids. We did talk to some of our contractors to get some additional information on why that was. So we are going to be rebidding those with a plan to do the projects next summer.
Because of material or personnel?
Personnel is certainly playing a part of that now, but in the roofing area, it's the majority of the problem is available of material and being able to get in the pipeline to get it done.
Too hot to be on top of a roof.
It is this week.
What about the roof now? What kind of condition is it in?
Oh, we're not having major leak problems. We were having some leak problems in the back area of the school near where the gymnasium connects to the main building. That was completed, or is in the process of being completed right now. I think that project is a little better than 90%. We're about 95% complete on that one, Mr. Sudduth. So any of the leak concerns will be taken care of with phase 1 and completed this summer, and then phase 2 will complete next summer, but we're not experiencing any other major leak problems at that school right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Last call, any additional questions? All right, that's item 5.01, and that item was given as information. We will proceed to item 5.02. Excuse me. Duke Energy Carolinas LLC easement at Dr. Phinnize J. Fisher Middle School. Presenter, Mr. Carlin, and I'll go back to Mr. David. Do you have any comments?
Just real quickly, this is related to, many of you remember going over to Fisher Middle when we received the electric bus through the Kids Ride Clean essay. So this is actually to provide, I believe, a right-of-way to get the power to a permanent source of power for the charging station for that bus, and possibly to expand if needed. Colonel Carlin, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, sir. The installation of this infrastructure will accommodate the one need right now, but will allow us to expand if the electric buses continue to gain traction.
Are there any questions, comments on section 5.02? Ms. Wells?
Well, I'll make the motion, then I have a question. So
All right.
I move to approve a utility easement as requested by Duke Energy Caroline's LLC at Dr. Phinnize J. Fisher Middle School.
I have a motion on the floor. Second, please. Second, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Wells?
So we have how many electric buses now?
Just the one.
So we're going to do stations at Fisher Middle and at Roper Mountain Science Center? Is that what this next one is?
The charger is at Fisher Middle only.
Okay, so currently we've been charging it how?
We've got a temporary station on the opposite side of the building.
Over by the cafeteria, entrance side of Fisher right now is where that is.
What's the long-term growth plan, do we think, for, you mentioned if we added more buses, and would this be sort of the hub for charging our electric buses, or?
I think the capability would be there. We don't have any plans right now to add electric buses to our fleet in the near future. I'm not saying that may not happen, but we just don't have that on the radar right now. This would give us the potential to add some additional charging stations there if we decided to expand that fleet, or if we were able to acquire some through some other method.
Is there another public infrastructure? Is there another entity that has public infrastructure to charge electric vehicles that we could use to charge the buses versus having our own? I'm seeing more of these, so.
Yeah, I know there were 3 other districts, including Greenville, that received one of the electric buses. I could reach out to them to see, how they're handling that. But
the city of Greenville, and even Greenville County, I think, is doing some. So then, who's the cost of installing this permanent charging station? Are we paying the cost? Is the state paying the cost, or?
I think there's some combined effort, Colonel Carlin.
There is. There's Duke Energies is obviously doing the install. There is a charge from them, but we're also doing part of the work to make this happen.
What's ballpark?
I would have to get that for you.
Okay. Well, I guess knowing that the city and the county are also investing in charging stations, that sort of infrastructure, just wondering is there a way for us to partner so that we don't duplicate, a service that we might be able to get otherwise. So, okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Lewis.
Thanks. I just want to confirm this is an underground line.
That is correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Any additional questions on this item? If there are no additional questions, I have a motion on the floor to approve a utility easement as requested by Duke Energy Carolinas LLC at Dr. Phinnize J. Fisher Middle School. All those in favor? Can I have a sign by aye?
Aye.
All those opposed? And the motion passes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and we will proceed to item 5.03. And that is Duke Energy Carolinas easement at Roper Mountain Science Center. The recommended action to approve a utility easement as requested by Duke Energy Carolinas LLC at Roper Mountain Science Center. And I will let Mr. Davies speak, and Mr. Carlin, you give your explanation or whatever.
Again, just quick summary. I believe this easement will allow a couple of power poles to be moved closer to the road from our property, and then also allow a lane to give an underground line to the transformer pad for the new building, I think, Colonel Carlin, is that correct?
That's correct.
So we'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Mr. Meek.
Make a motion to approve a utility easement as requested by Duke Energy Carolinas LLC at Roper Mountain Science Center.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? All right, Okay, all right, no discussion. All those in favor of the motion to approve a utility easement as requested by Duke Energy Carolinas LLC at Roper Mountain Science Center. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And the motion passes. Thank you. And let me see. We're now at item 5.04, recommendations for indefinite delivery contract design services for multi-term small projects. Wait a
Madam
minute.
Chairman,
That's executive session.
that's what I was going to ask you. I don't know if anybody needs to go in executive session or not. It's got the information there.
Does anybody need to go into executive session to discuss this item?
I'll make a motion to select firms 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to provide architectural services for a multi-term small project throughout the district for the next 5 years.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion? All right, with no discussion, I ask for your vote. All of those in favor of the motion, which is to select firms 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to provide architectural services for multi-term small projects throughout the district for the next 5 years. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? And the motion passes. Thank you very much. I would like to make a comment to you, Mr. Carlin. When I reviewed these firms, I appreciated exactly the firm 4, that when I looked over the qualifications and the people who were involved in the firm, that firm 4 was extremely diverse. And I appreciate having them in this selection process.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much to you and your team.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison-Farron. Thank you, Mr. Davies. Any other questions, comments? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Have a motion, is there a second? Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.